A stalemate between the Phoenix Suns and Deandre Ayton, the breaking news of the day, as well as part 6, I believe, of our Suns preview series. 13 questions that will define the Phoenix Suns season. Coming, all of that right up here on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen. Been covering the Suns as a credentialed media member for the past 5 years. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen every single morning here. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. Follow me on Twitter at Brendon Kleen 14. Again, we are going to hit on the news of the day. Deandre Ayton, his camp clearly leaking some negotiating tactics to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, and we'll answer our 6th question of the Suns preview series here on Locked On Suns. 13 questions that will define the Phoenix Suns season. Joining me to do all of that is Damon Allred. Damon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm ready to talk some Suns.
You picked a good day. We scheduled this way before we had any idea that Deandre Ayton would choose today to I don't want to put the blame on him, but that this day would be the newsy day of all newsy days.
Yeah. He just put himself out there.
He really did. Well, let's start there. Just to clear it up with people, for people. This morning, like 7:30 Arizona time, Adrian Wojnarowski has a story locked and loaded, tweets it out, basically saying Deandre Ayton has sort of staked his side here, that he will not accept a contract lower than a max, with escalators up to that high level max of the All-NBA players, which is $207 million. 192, I believe, is the lower level, and he's there. That's where he wants to be, and the Suns have yet to come around on that, and basically that's where things are. That wasn't super unexpected, but let me ask you it that way, because I'm here assuming that came from Deandre Ayton. Do you feel like that was the sort of sequencing of events here, that DeAndre's camp took this, chess move and is now escalating negotiations by leaking this?
Yeah, you can tell the way Woj words the article and the tweet even, that it came straight from Ayton. Like, as soon as he gets done with the formalities of here's what's going on, as soon as that part is done, it's just instantly Ayton blossomed under Monty Williams this season. And here are these other people from the draft class, like Jae, like Porter Jr., that have all gotten their max extensions already. And Ayton hasn't gotten his. Mikal hasn't gotten any extension either. And so you can just tell it's from Ayton.
My favorite part of all of that, I don't know if you noticed it the same way that I did, Damon, but Ayton held NBA Finals MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo to 53% shooting as their primary defender in the finals, while Antetokounmpo shot 70% against the rest of the Suns. Like, I'm all for, the guy who wrote this for a Woj very deeply diving into synergy as they're writing up their little article. But what on earth? Like, they were really digging for some numbers here in this story to fluff it up.
Yeah, that part especially sounded a lot like back when Iguodala won Finals MVP just for holding LeBron to like 35, yes, 10, and 10 instead of like 50, 20, and 20.
Yeah, he still shot better than 50%, but it wasn't 70. So pay us, pay us money. Yeah. I wanted to correct myself too. So Ayton could earn $172 million on the basically lower level of that contract. I set it at 192. It's been the same number for the whole season. None of that has changed. Effectively, what happened today was that Ayton, again, escalated things. And so I wonder where you think that leaves us. Like, does this change anything for you, Damon, as far as how you feel like, how likely you feel like it is that a deal actually gets done? Did this push the Suns in a situation or in a direction that they weren't already going to go? Do you think this cements that he's absolutely getting the max? Where does this leave us?
Honestly, James Jones doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to relent in these sort of negotiations. It seems like he came into this negotiation process with the mindset that if Ayton wants a max, he's going to have to be a max level player on offense too, instead of just on defense. And I think it's well within James Jones and the Suns' rights to want to see more of that flourished offensive role from Ayton before they commit long-term like that.
I think this is, to me, I tend to agree with you. I don't see the front office. I don't see ownership as being easily pushed around. I mean, I was randomly awake early this morning. I was checking other Suns people's just to see their thoughts, and I could tell there was still a lot of sleeping happening. But I was firing off tweets first thing this morning when it all came out, and one of the things that I felt like my initial instinct was just to say that, as you were just saying, this is now a pattern this offseason. With Chris Paul and Cameron Payne, it has worked. They were able to get those guys for less than we thought, team-friendly contracts. And, for right now, it's all smiles and rainbows there as far as we know. But now with Ayton, it's sort of the negative side of that, right? It's the squeezing and the hard bargain and the line in the sand that James Jones has clearly drawn with each and every guy that he has had the opportunity to bring back here is rubbing Ayton the wrong way, and understandably so. And the other thing that I thought right away reading this stuff was the leverage is all on Deandre Ayton's side. Now, I saw some people basically saying like, well, how can that be the case when the Suns are the only team able to sign him to the 5-year full, that $172 million number with the escalators that can go up? And obviously, I understand how that works. Another team next offseason could only sign him to, in restricted free agency, a 4-year contract that would not be quite as big because the raises can't be as high and all that stuff. I get that. But at the end of the day, Deandre Ayton, if he leaves, of course, that's a disaster situation. He knows that the Suns need his talent. He knows that he just proved himself. He knows that sort of public sentiment is on his side, and he knows that he's better and more established than a lot of the other guys that have signed contracts, particularly Michael Porter Jr. And you could say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, although I'm a pretty big fan, but he hasn't performed in the playoffs at all. So that was sort of my read on things. And I just feel like Deandre Ayton is probably right to do this. Like, pushing this button the way that he did, I feel like was the right move on his part because he's publicizing this. We've all just been assuming, that he doesn't, maybe he's going to accept less. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they'll, get it done and this, that, and whatever. But it's clear that he wants more. And it's clear that he has a credible claim to making more money. And I feel like I today, for the first time, felt like something might actually break here, that we could be headed toward next summer with a contract for Ayton. Do you feel like that's a possibility? Did today change the likelihood of that in your mind?
I really don't think that James Jones and Robert Sarver are ready to sign him to the max right now until they see more on court, especially on offense, just further consolidation of what he showed in the playoffs. I think there's maybe some sort of feeling in the front office that it could have been a fluke or that it was just too small of a sample size for them to really commit long-term with such high amounts of money. But I just think they want to see more, and I don't think they're going to give out a max before the season starts.
You think that, because I know you said that before, but like, you think that it's more likely that they would just kind of wait than, like, the impetus on their end right now, you think, is to basically go into the season, let it continue to linger, and watch him develop more rather than maybe caving, paying a little bit more. Maybe they pay something close to the max, but not quite, or something like that. I understand there's some limitations. They can't just pay any old amount that they want, but there are some compromises that could be made. There could be, let's give you a player option that maybe you wouldn't have gotten. Let's give you some of these maybe incentives that get you up to that number, but right now we're not going to give you that number. Like, you think that they're more likely to just wait?
Yeah, I think they're pretty more likely to wait. I could see a situation where like he gets a little less than the max, but he gets a no trade clause, or he gets a player option on the 5th year or something like that.
Some of these sweeteners, right?
Yeah, just a way for them to meet in the middle of where they're at right now. But I don't think he gets the full max before the season.
It is really tough. I think that you're right. When the Michael Porter Jr. thing happened, I could have sworn that the Suns were just going to end up paying Ayton, and Ayton's agent was able to just basically at that point say, like, you have to, you're going to be in the laughing stock of the league if you don't keep this thing together. But the fact that they got to this point and they've still held firm, seemingly, according to this report, makes me feel today, for the first time in a while, like 2 months ago, I was like, no, it's not happening. Then I decided it was happening. I've gone back and forth, but today I do think that I lean more toward what you're saying, that it might just hold out. So with that said, I told you we might go 2 segments on this. I figured we'd have some more thoughts. There's another part of this report from Woj that I think sort of gets deeper into the question here, aside from the offense, like you talked about there, I think is something else holding the Suns back. We'll get into that in just 1 second. First, though, a quick word from SweatBlock. SweatBlock is the little secret to confidence right in your back pocket. It's doctor created and doctor recommended, and it is a deodorant that changed everything, really. Past 10 years on Amazon, bestseller, 13,000 reviews, #1 in the antiperspirant category. So again, they really changed the game because it's not like your typical deodorant. It's not a bar or a swab that you're rubbing underneath and constantly reapplying and all of that. Everybody who lives in Arizona fully understands what I'm saying. It's not like that. It's a wipe. It is like a wet nap. You peel it open, you wipe it underneath. They say to do it before bed. Sleep with it on there. It applies. It gets in there. It adheres. They tell you can use it for up to 7 days per use. I get a little nervous. I've used it before. I let it go 3 days, and then it was September in Arizona, so I got a little bit nervous and reapplied 3 days later. But it did work for 3, which is more than you can say for a deodorant that normally lasts 3 hours. So again, little secret to confidence. Allows you to wear what you want to wear, put it wherever you need, a little bag, a toiletry bag, a briefcase, your back pocket, like I said, whatever it is to get you through the day uninhibited. You got nothing to worry about. No odor, no wetness, no anything. Stop it in its tracks, and you are good to go. So if you or someone actually, look, it's a kind of a funny stocking stuffer, but I wouldn't blame you if you went for it. Check out SweatBlock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON. Again, that's sweatblock.com, promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at checkout, or at Amazon and CVS. Today's show is also brought to you by Sleeper. Back in 2018, the fantasy sports experts over at Sleeper realized that fantasy basketball was broken. Games were being won and lost based on whose players had more scheduled games that week. It made no sense, required very little strategy, so what Sleeper decided to do is to go ahead and fix the whole thing. They released a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball called Game Picks, available only on Sleeper. In Game Picks, owners pick a single game per week for each starter to count toward their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games played between opponents. The days of losing because your opponent's player simply had more scheduled games to play in that week are over. The days of mindless, busy work, setting your lineup and checking in and updating it all day, every day are also over. So whether you prefer redraft, keeper, or dynasty, Game Picks has you covered. Sleeper cracked the code for fantasy basketball, making it more like the fantasy football games that we all know and love. So you are going to love Game Picks if you like fantasy football. It's really just they turn fantasy basketball into fantasy football. Download the Sleeper app, start a league with your friends today, and enjoy. Okay, Damon. So the thing I was talking about coming into that break that gets a little deeper into some of these things is this line. Or paragraph, really. A significant part of Ayton, this is from the Woj story, a significant part of Ayton's development and maturity has revolved around the relationship and trust he has built with Coach Monty Williams in their 2 seasons together. That would be tested should Ayton spend the season believing he's headed to restricted free agency. I always tend to, as I think you were saying you do, the intel that Woj gathers on a day-to-day basis, I think seeps into some of these reports when he writes them, although I doubt he actually writes them. And this one was telling to me because I think that part may actually have been informed by reporting that Woj has done with the Suns. And the idea that Ayton, that they sort of see this situation as very precarious, that Ayton's consistency and growth is a direct result of his relationship with Monty. I wonder if they're just worried that they don't want to have to do that for, the next 7 years to keep this guy engaged in everything enough to earn that max level. Like, they can't have a coach dedicating his every day to making sure this guy's living up to his contract. And I think they're worried that if that piece is not there and he's having to sort of develop and grow and be dedicated on his own, that those things might start to break down. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to see it from Ayton's point of view, I think you do see it as a sort of situation like if they don't want to commit to him before the season, then it's like they don't trust him or they don't view him as mature as he thinks he is, maybe. So, yeah, I could see how Ayton would be a little bit hurt by that stance from the team.
But are the Suns wrong to feel that way? Like, are they wrong to look at it and say, this is a guy who, like, we all saw it in the finals and we were fawning over Monty Williams, pumping Ayton up and saying, play with force. And, you are holding yourself to this standard and that's why you're down, but, we need you and you're valuable and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, on the other end of that was a guy who somehow was down on himself in a huge moment. And so I do think there is some credibility to the fact, aside from the offense part of this, that the motivation factors and sort of the buildup of how Ayton runs things internally and operates within this team is precarious. Like I said, it's kind of hanging in the balance in some ways, where what happens if Monty Williams is not solely focused on building this guy up every day and he becomes a vet and a leader and everything else the way they want him to be? Can they believe that that's going to happen?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. They do have every right to feel that way. I was just sort of seeing it from Ayton's perspective, playing the devil's advocate. I mean, you look at the coaching staff coming into this year. Like, we had a couple departures with Willie Green going to the Pelicans and with Ricardo, is it Foy or Foy's?
Foyce.
Yeah. With him going to Tommy Lloyd's staff.
I actually sometimes like to say, I imagine that it's Foy. That would just be funnier to me. I mean, I'll just go with it. I don't know if it's right or wrong. They all say Foyce, but.
Okay. Yeah. So with
Foyce
going, yeah, Foyce going to U of A too. There's a reason why Mark Bryant didn't leave. And there's a reason why Mark Bryant is still sort of looked at as Ayton's babysitter or one-on-one coach in a certain light. So I think the Suns feel like they're in the right for feeling that Ayton's not ready to be trusted, but I can definitely see where Ayton would disagree just from his own confident perspective.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's very kind of worn out as a phrase, but your contract is what you're going to be paid. Your contract is what the market says your contract is, not what doubts your team can add up into a deduction from your max, right? Like, your contract is whatever you could go out and earn. And the reality, I think, is that Ayton is right to feel like he deserves, and that the counterparts that he has around the NBA and their money has basically cemented him as somebody in the caliber of somebody who should be earning a max. I also think that the Suns are right to think we want to see more. So maybe that does lead us to a situation where the most likely scenario is that both sides just say, we'll wait until next offseason. And obviously all these options will still be available to us. They can still sign Ayton to the same exact contract. And, maybe by then he'll have already made all NBA and he can, push that in front of them and say, look, I told you I could do this. And now you can give me that escalated deal and we'll all go home happy. With that said, though, and I talked about this in one of my first questions for this series because I thought it might come up, how worried are you that affects the chemistry of this team as Ayton is now basically heading into every game and every practice thinking I got to earn my money, and that becomes a focus for him, and there's now this negotiation that has not gone as both sides would have liked it to.
So I kind of view the team structure and infrastructure as being really strong at this point. Landry Shamet had some words the other day about how the culture here is just different than other organizations, and he's been on some playoff contending teams.
Yeah.
So I think that as far as the other players on the team go, it won't affect them too much. But Ayton, I can see him wanting to get his own a little more on offense. But at the end of the day, when he sees JaVale McGee right behind him playing within himself and getting the credit from other players and from the coaches for playing the way he plays, like Shamet had a quote also about McGee, about just how good it is to have a guy that rolls as hard as McGee. And so I think that between the rest of the team still functioning as it did this past year and potentially even better with another year under their belt, and with there being a real backup center behind Ayton this year, I just think there will be too much for him to be in his own lane before he can really just be back in the team's lane.
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope so. I obviously agree with you on the point of the backup center, and that's a great point by you because that's something that they had the first 2 years of Ayton's career, and they made a very concerted point of having that. Rashawn Holmes and Aaron Baines, guys who were starting caliber players who could push Ayton from behind there, and now they're back to having that. So I'm sure that was very much a hole that they needed to fill from a rotation perspective, but it probably wasn't an accident that was a high priority just in terms of some of this motivation stuff. But it'll obviously be interesting. We are basically T-minus 12 days by the time you all are hearing this until deadline day. We don't still know much of anything about Mikal Bridges, so that's a conversation for a different day. This Ayton situation seems like it will linger. But let's close out the show with the real purpose of us hopping on this call today, Damon, originally, which was to answer the question of will and can Cam Johnson overtake Jae Crowder as the Suns' fifth starter. Lots of thoughts there, so stay tuned. First, though, quick word from betonline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, and they are back and better than ever as all eyes are on the gridiron for another football season. BetOnline, your number one spot for all the pro and college football action all season long with a new and updated site and interface. That means you get even more odds and props and contests, where BetOnline continues to once again be that number one source for everything football. So the way you're going to celebrate the return of football, at this point, it's not even a return. I feel like it's all day, every day at this point, but they are still rolling with their celebratory bonus, which is 50% straight to your account when you make your first deposit and use the promo code Locked On. So again, that's head to betonline.ag on the web or their mobile app. Put that first bit of money down. Use the promo code Locked On when you do to get a 50% welcome bonus straight to your account. From football, basketball, and boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, take advantage of all the amazing offers at BetOnline for the entirety of the 2021 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. Part 6 of our Suns preview series, 13 questions that will define the Phoenix Suns season. Damon, we are at long last here for the original purpose of our chat today. I'll just give you the floor. How likely do you see it being that Cam Johnson overtakes Jae Crowder as the Suns' fifth starter? Not by, the 20th when the games start, but maybe by the end of the season into the playoffs.
Yeah, so if I can real quick, I just want to share some lineup data from Basketball Index.
Always.
So for the Jae Crowder combination with the rest of the starters, those five, it's Paul, Booker, Bridges, Crowder, and Ayton. Those five logged 667 minutes together, which is the highest total of any lineup in the league. And they had an adjusted net rating of 2.9, a really high scoring gravity almost in the 99th percentile, and then finishing and spacing both in the 80s percentiles. And then when you add Cam Johnson into that instead of Crowder, those guys had a 188-minute sample size with a net rating of 3 as opposed to 2.9. So pretty neck and neck there. And a scoring gravity of 99.7, which is actually the highest of any lineup with that sample size of minutes. And then they had a 98th percentile in finishing and 79th in spacing. So it really just depends to me on the looks that you're getting from the other team. Like we talked a lot about during the first round of last year's playoffs, that when you're going against a team like the Lakers, you just need to have Crowder in there because of the physicality and defense that he presents at the forward spot. And Cam really stood his ground when he was put in those situations during that series, but it wasn't to the level of Crowder. And so I just think that if you're more in small ball situations, that Cam might get a look there. But when you're going up against a big team like the Lakers, you need Crowder.
That's a great way to put it. I appreciate you doing the homework because those numbers, I think, illustrate a lot of the angles of why this is interesting. Obviously, we know that despite Jae Crowder now having sort of pretty much since he got traded to Miami, he has been consistently solid from deep. We thought of him as a streaky player, but he's put together a calendar year of good shooting. But we still know that Cam Johnson is a better shooter, right? And I shared last week or on Monday actually, talking with Max McCauley, the fact that Johnson was one of the only players on the Suns that increased their rim frequency from the regular season to the playoffs. So the awesome dunks and highlight reel plays that we all sort of took home with us during that run were backed up by a real noticeable aggressiveness on his part. And I think he's going to continue to get better there in terms of diversifying his offensive game, attacking closeouts. We actually did see a lot of that in the preseason where he was able to get the ball on the move a little bit, either designed or just getting ahead of steam when the closeout came. And those are all really promising things. I don't really worry that the offense will continue to come along. I don't know if he'll ever be like a, pull-up shooter or, operator in the pick and roll, that type of a player. I think he is a little bit too slow and the handle's not really there, and he's already 25. I think really the place that you're going to look is the defense. And as you said, in those individual matchups, I think it's pretty clear that Crowder has the upper hand. And so in matchups where there is a specific player on the opposing team where LeBron or somebody is just obviously going to need a stronger veteran player to defend them, then yes, I think Crowder will be there, whether it's starting or closing. He'll be the important forward that has to be on the floor as the roster currently is constructed. I guess where I come down on it though, Damon, is I trust the Suns team. I'm less worried about the Suns team defense than I am about them continuing to sort of bust the ceiling off of the team offense. And maybe that's counterintuitive because I think a lot of people would look at, how the Bucks series ended and not being able to stop Giannis and this and that and feel like, well, our defense needs to get better. But I don't really think that anyone on this roster is going to change a whole lot there. So I tend to think the defense is sort of the sum of its parts, type of situation where those guys, the cohesion and everything, that's why they're great at defense. Deandre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, that's really the reason there. The offense is where you might be able to kind of keep getting incrementally better. And so that's why I feel like I lean toward Cam, especially to just get a ton more reps during this regular season, at least even his minutes with Crowder compared to where he was last year, where, yes, he was hurt a little bit too, but Crowder was playing way more than him.
Yeah, there have actually been times this offseason when I've been thinking about like which guy aside from Paul and Booker have the highest offensive ceilings. And there have been times when I've kind of thought Cam has the highest ceiling out of those non-stars, even over Mikal or over DA. I just really was impressed by what he was doing against the Bucks. And when his shot started to come back around after healing up from his injuries, he just looked almost unstoppable against certain units.
I just think it's quiet for him, and the nature of his, like, we talk about it a lot with Ayton just because we talk about everything more with Ayton than we do with Cam Johnson, but the way that the seasons were sort of fractured for him is even more pronounced because he didn't have that rookie year the way that Ayton did. And so the rookie year was obviously cut short last year. He had the injuries and COVID in the middle of the season and wasn't able to get into great rhythm. I talked a bit ago about the run where he was, with the starters for a bit and everything else. And that looked promising. The 3 forward monster that they unveiled when Booker had to miss those 2 games in late January were interesting. And I think that if he can just get consistent time, that he will grow on offense. And I think he'll grow on defense too. Look, Jae Crowder is one of the more coveted, forward defenders in the NBA. I doubt that Cam will probably get to that level just from a strength perspective more than anything. But I think he can get close, and I think he's going to be eventually a much, much better offensive player. So that's where I sort of come down. And the other reason to bring this up is just looking long-term and the fact that Jay has 1 year left on his contract after this one. It was only 3 years when it was signed, so we're already looking toward the end of that. And obviously at the end of this season, Cam will be up for an extension. So I do think there's also a part of this where it's important to, at the very least, again, even out their minutes a little bit so that you can see what you have in Cam Johnson. Just treating this as a pure, Crowder's our starter, Cam is our backup, and not going out of your way to find opportunities for Cam Johnson on the floor this season, I think would be a big mistake.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And going back to that point you made about the 3-wing lineup, I have some numbers to share about that lineup as well, if that's cool.
Shoot. Yeah.
So Paul, Bridges, Johnson, Crowder, Ayton all played 82 minutes together with an adjusted net rating of 6.8 and just outstanding scoring percentiles. We're talking like 96.2 in gravity, 88.8 in finishing, and 83.8 in spacing. So those guys were just monsters on offense, and you would figure that they were on defense as well, just with the length that comes with that.
Sure.
And with really 4 of those guys being pretty great defenders for their position, and then Paul not being a pushover either, even despite his age.
To me, and that's, those are interesting. I think in the same way that playing Shamet with Booker and Paul or Payne with Booker and Paul is going to help their development and just be useful for getting those guys on the floor as much as possible, I think the same is true for some of those forward combos, whether that's super small ball with Crowder at the 5 type of thing, or going bigger with Cam as basically a 2. I think that you just have to try that stuff. And I keep using the word experimental for this regular season. I hope that's what we see. But to close things out here, I think that the version of the team that I imagine where Cam Johnson does start, and whether that is after Crowder's gone from this team or whether it's sooner and we do start to see it this year, I feel like it mostly is coming from the other guys on the team getting better at certain things. Like if Mikal Bridges becomes the type of guy, and your mileage might vary on this, but if he becomes the type of player who can take some of those matchups that right now we see as the Jae Crowder matchups, and Deandre Ayton continues to improve on defense, not only just anchoring things, but also being able to take a guy like Giannis, like we saw him do. And on the other end of the floor, Devin Booker becoming just this monster that can basically be an offense unto himself, which, again, your mileage may vary. I don't know if we'll see that player at that top level of a Damian Lillard or a James Harden. I don't know if Booker will become that. But in that reality, I do think a player like Cam Johnson, who is just a solid team defender, big for his position, and shoots the lights out of the ball with some offensive upside, it's pretty good, right? I mean, if he's your Duncan Robinson, I know they're different players, but just a high volume shooter who fits in the offense, fits in the defense, and doesn't kill you. that's working just fine for the Heat because of the way that everything else sort of pieces together for them. So I do think there's a future where the ways in which this Suns team, like right now, we think of Jae Crowder being so vital to so many of the things that they do. I think if other players on this roster keep getting better where we know that they will, Crowder becomes less vital, less important, and his role I could see, either just dwindling or being unnecessary and not too long.
Yeah. Is it okay if I throw out a trade idea?
Do it. Yes, I'm all for trades.
So with the Ayton stalemate and with Cam Johnson potentially rendering Crowder expendable, what are your thoughts on a trade centered around Ayton and Crowder for Cat?
Oh wow, you're doubling down on the Suns civil war of the day.
Yeah.
I love how Cat has just become the guy. Like, I know things are a nightmare in Minnesota, but it is just kind of funny. Like, there's really never been much of a connection at all here. I mean, nothing really substantial, and we all just sort of are like, oh, what about Towns? It's funny. I don't even blame you for it.
It's the Booker friendship.
Yeah, of course. It's the Booker friendship
bracelets.
It's the slam cover. It's the fact that he wore the jersey in the one picture, and Brian
and
Windhorst.
Jimmy Fallon, right? Or Jimmy Kimmel? Which show was it that they went on together?
I think you're right. Yes, I remember that. And yeah, Brian Windhorst constantly putting fuel to the fire. I do get it, but it is kind of funny. I would say in that version of the team that I was sort of concocting, I actually feel like if you're trading a little bit of defense for offense, which I feel like, again, is probably the right way to go based on the personnel with Booker and Chris Paul for now and everything else, that you probably, I think the team gets worse overall if you're losing the value of Crowder and losing what Ayton does and replacing it with Towns. Like, I just haven't seen it enough from Karl-Anthony Towns to be a winning defensive player. Now, when he was with Butler, we didn't really have that complaint quite as much, so I get that, but I would be worried that the identity of the team changes a little bit too drastically, and you're looking at like top 3 offense, bottom 10 defense, and that's not a championship team.
Yeah. So let me pitch you on this idea regarding it and make my case for it. Just that Cat throughout his time in Minnesota has never really had like an established point of attack defender or any real semblance of perimeter defense in front of him. And a lot of people have pointed at that as the reason why his defense has struggled. And so if he comes in here and we start lineups of like Paul, Booker, Bridges, Johnson, and Cat, I think there's enough on the perimeter to kind of deter offenses from really having a straight path to the rim like they do a lot of the time in Minnesota.
It's fair. And I mean, I also think like the other part of it is that if you're just playing smart basketball and not playing young guys all the time, then you're just going to be put in better positions. I mean, you're not going to be turning the ball over. You're not going to be taking bad shots, things that all compound and create bad defensive situations for big men who have to sort of compensate. Like, Ayton was a minus defender for the Suns and somebody that, we were questioning until all of a sudden he wasn't. And a lot of that had to do with who he was playing around. So I hear you completely. And like, I'm fully ready for a massive Karl-Anthony Towns season. I think that guy is one of the best offensive bigs in the history of the NBA. If you just go and look at what he's actually produced year to year. So again, I mean, maybe even saying top 3 offense was underselling the potential of that group. And maybe bottom 10 defense was underselling it. And if you're like a historically great offense in a middle of the pack defense, as Suns fans will know, you can get a pretty long way. So I think I get why Suns fans like it so much. It sounds like you're convinced. So it sounds like we started out with what will Deandre Ayton do, and now you've traded him, you've traded Jae Crowder, and we're moving on. Forget last year. None of it mattered. We need a new team.
I do want to go on the record that it wasn't like a serious let's trade Ayton. I do love Ayton still, and I think that he has a real shot at third or second team All-NBA as well as all defensive team this year. But it's just fun to play around with the idea,
It is. And look, I mean, as a way of tying everything together, frankly, like we are laughing about talking about Ayton trades now, but we're 2-3 steps away from that being more of a discussion. And I don't really want things to get there because I think this team has a chance to be right back in a position to win a title again. And I don't think you disrupt that over a few $1 million or your pride. But it's not too far away from a situation where you have to at least think about that stuff. And also with the Jae Crowder part of it, I think you already should be talking and thinking about Jae Crowder trades if you're the Suns. Not urgently, not let's dump the guy and he's no longer a part of our plans. But if you can upgrade that guy while his value is at its peak before his contract expires, I think that's a smart team building strategy. So, these things kind of intersected coincidentally for us today. And I appreciate you doing, again, that homework to give us the numbers and the trades. Is there anything we can be looking forward to from you writing wise over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the season?
I don't have anything in the works right now for the Suns, but I am working on some draft stuff for Zona Hoops. I'm sure I'll have some more up for Brightside before the regular season starts. I just posted an article on there about the Suns' predictability and how it cost them in the playoffs. But I do want to note, what a job by us to not mention really too deep Robert Sarver in the Ayton conversation.
See, we could have just sailed through and his name wouldn't have even come up. No, I just am tired of it. I actually feel like the guy has changed. I also think he has proven that if they're going to win, he'll pay. I think that has gotten a little bit overblown. Like the Woj article said, he hasn't paid the tax since 2009-10. It's like, you mean the last time they were good? It's really like sort of a silly thing to like, should he have been paying the tax to bring, Eric Bledsoe back on whatever contract he named his price at? Like, what are we doing? It's
give
very
Shaq
reasonable.
Harrison the max.
Exactly. Like, give Tyson Chandler even more money. Is that what we should like? I don't think
Marcus didn't come.
Yeah. He wanted his buddy paid and we didn't do it big enough. But yeah, I don't think it's all the way Sarver. Until we know more, I won't go there. And cool. Yeah. So check him out at Bright Side of the Sun at Zona Hoops. He is Damon Allred. And we will be back with Robbie Calland of Up Rocks tomorrow, talking all things Devin Booker. Haven't really touched on Book a ton yet on this preview series, so it's long past due. You can look forward to that show tomorrow. Until then, guys, enjoy your Wednesday.